Why did they laugh every time she knelt by the mortar tube? Why was it so easy to mock the one who never fired, who never shouted, who never seemed to fight back? The training ground at Camp Iron Vale shimmered under midday heat, dust rising with every step, clinging to sweat-soaked uniforms. Orders barked, boots hammered, laughter bled sharp in the air, and at the edge of the mortar pit, one woman knelt in silence. Her hands wrapped steady around cold iron. The mortar tube sank into the ground like a stake, and she braced against it the way she'd been taught. Exact, careful, breath measured. But to the recruits around her, it looked like nothing. Just a girl lining up a tube. "Look at her," one muttered. "Mortar girl, that's all she does." Another voice joined, higher, cruel. "Careful now, don't chip a nail." Pebbles flicked into the pit beside her. Dust clung to her knees. She didn't look up, she didn't flinch, she didn't answer. Because the weapon in front of her demanded more than pride. It demanded accuracy, calm, patience. And gave it all. The others didn't see it, they only saw silence. But from across the field, Major Rowan watched closer. He had seen ridicule break recruits before. He had seen the noise of the crowd splinter discipline like glass. But this one didn't crack. She was steady, movements exact, breathing like a metronome, every adjustment deliberate, too deliberate for a beginner. His jaw tightened. Something here didn't add up. And yet the laughter rolled on. Mortar girl, nothing more. A misfire cracked from a nearby pit, shaking the dirt, coughing grit into the air. Recruits stumbled back, cursing, laughing nervously. Didn't move. She steadied her weapon, adjusted the angle, and reset her grip. No panic, no jerk of surprise. Just precision. Narrowed his eyes. That wasn't training, that was instinct. The kind born from fire. The noise around her faded, her focus tunneled. Wind, slope, vibration under her knees, she had all without a word. Another insult spat behind her. Pathetic, she acts like that's real soldiering. But this time moved. His boots struck the dirt hard. The laughter drained at once. He didn't speak, not yet, he just stood over her, studying. Rose slowly, wiping dust across her sleeve. For the briefest moment her eyes met his, not defiant, not pleading, something else. A recognition, a question. Then she looked away. And that's when saw it. A glint. Just beneath the fold of her jacket. Not a button, not a pin. Something heavier, older, sharper. His stomach nodded. He had seen medals before, commendations, badges of courage. But not this. Not here, not now. "Stop," said, his voice was iron. The recruits froze. "Remove your jacket." For the first time that day, hesitated. Her hand paused on the seam, not long, but long enough for silence to deepen. Every recruit turned, eyes widening, breath held. Fabric shifted, dust clung as the jacket slid from her shoulders. And then sunlight struck metal. It gleamed once undeniable, a metal. Not bronze, not ribboned. Dark, etched with markings few had ever seen. The field fell silent. The air itself seemed to stop moving. His jaw clenched, his breath caught in his throat. He knew enough to recognize what shouldn't exist. The kind of insignia buried in records, erased from memory, whispered only in rumors. The Phantom Legion. The laughter that had filled the ground moments before had collapsed into nothing. Recruit stared, searching his face for answers, finding none. And she didn't move, didn't explain, didn't acknowledge. She simply adjusted the mortar tube again, calm as ever. The weight of her silence pressed heavier than any words. The only sound left was wind over dust. Until it was. A siren split the air. Sharp, piercing, relentless. Not the cadence of a drill. The pitch rattled bones. Recruits jolted, instructors shouted, the camp shook. From beyond the ridges, A black column of smoke rose into the sky. Thick, oily, real. "This isn't scheduled," a young soldier whispered. "That's real." Panic flickered across the field, boots scraped, orders scattered, the air tasted of fire. And the so-called mortar girl stood. Her breathing slowed, her jaw clenched. And in the chaos, her voice rose. "Form on me, keep the line tight. We control this ground or the flames will eat it." The recruits froze, torn between fear and instinct. But in her words, in her steadiness, they heard something they hadn't before. And one by one, they obeyed. What do you do when the fire isn't a drill? When smoke blackens the sky and the ground trembles under explosions? Do you wait for orders or follow the voice that cuts through the chaos? The siren howled over Camp Iron Vale, sharp enough to slice thought into panic. Recruits staggered into half formations, eyes darting toward the plume of smoke rising from the direction of the storage sheds. Not the controlled kind, not staged for training. This was heavy, acrid, real. For a breath, no one moved. Then the ground shook with the pop of igniting munitions. The line collapsed. Recruits shouted over one another. Some stumbled toward safety. Others froze in place. Instructors barked orders, their voices cracking against the chaos, but panic was louder. And the mortar girl no one had taken seriously ran toward the fire. Her voice tore through the noise. "Form on me, keep the line tight. We hold here or the flames take the field." The words landed like commands etched into stone, not requests, not panic, certainty. A few recruits blinked, stunned. Then one followed, then another. And in the absence of order from above, they moved with her. Pushed through the crowd, fury in his step. "Get back, this area's compromised." But the recruits weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at her. Bent low, hands gripping heavy sandbags, dragging them into line. "Here," she barked, "stack them tight, block the spread." Her hair clung damp against her temples, eyes locked on the fire. Her tone carried no hesitation. It was the cadence of someone who had given these orders before. The first sandbag hit the dirt, then another, then a wall began to rise. Stopped cold. He wanted to pull her out, remind her she was just a recruit, strip her of this command she had seized without permission. But the line was holding. And it was holding because of her. The fire roared louder, spitting sparks across the ground. One shed door caved in with a thunderous crash, flames licking the munitions inside. Explosions snapped like gunfire, fragments whistling into the dirt. Recruits flinched. Didn't. "Stay low, heads down," she shouted. "Keep stacking." They did. The smoke thickened, choking, clawing into throats. Ripped a flare from a crate, cracked it to life, and hurled it into the dirt between the fire and the line. Crimson smoke bled across the air, curling thick as a curtain. "That's our shield, stay behind it." Coughing, recruits pressed to the wall, their silhouettes vanishing inside the red haze. His fists clenched, he stepped into the smoke, his voice cutting raw. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Her reply came sharp, fierce, unflinching. "Saving your camp." For a heartbeat, their eyes locked through the drifting veil. No fear in hers. Only determination. And in that instant knew, this wasn't improvisation. This was memory. This was training no ordinary recruit should carry. Another explosion ripped the ground, shaking the line. Staggered but didn't fall. She shielded a younger soldier with her own body, then pushed him forward. "You're fine, keep moving." The boy stared at her in shock, then gripped his sandbag and ran on. And the recruits, they followed her. Not because she outranked them. Not because she was assigned. Because she was the only one standing steady when everything else cracked. His chest burned, his authority undermined in plain sight. But he couldn't stop her, not yet. The fire clawed higher, devouring wood, spitting sparks into the second row of sheds. Spun, voice ragged but relentless. Split the line, half with me, half hold the wall, move. They obeyed instantly. No hesitation. She charged into the smoke, a wedge of recruits at her back. Shadows flickered against orange light as they hauled hoses, rolled barrels, stamped at sparks before they leapt into flame. Followed slower, his instincts a storm. Every second screamed she had overstepped, that she was pulling his recruits out of his hands. But without her, this yard would already be ash. A gust of wind shoved embers across the field, dropped, rolled a sandbag over the sparks, stamped them out. Her shoulders heaved, lungs seared, but her voice cut through the roar. Don't let it jump, cut it here. They did. On hands and knees, recruits stomped and smothered until embers hissed into silence. Hope flickered, then the largest blast yet shattered it. The first shed erupted in thunder. The shockwave slammed across the field, tossing recruits to the dirt. Smoke split open, tearing the veil away. Flames raged, supplies collapsed, the line stretched too thin. Barked into his radio, calling for reinforcements. But even as he shouted, his eyes cut to her. Stood upright, ash streaked her face, hands raw from hauling weight, breath ragged but unbroken. And he saw it then, clearer than ever. This was no accident. This was no lucky composure. This was a soldier. One the army had buried. One carrying a medal that shouldn't exist. She shouted again, voice hoarse but blazing. Hold your ground, the wall holds or the camp falls. The recruits rose, coughing, burning, afraid. But they followed. Sandbags slammed, buckets hissed, flares struck to life, feeding the crimson haze. And under her voice, chaos bent into order. His gut twisted. The metal burned in his memory. The fire raged in front of him. And the girl mocked as mortar girl. Commanded both. When the last flame dies, what's left? Relief or suspicion? The roar of the fire had finally broken. Hoses hissed. Smoldering beams sagged, blackened, skeletal. The air stank of charred wood and scorched paint. Recruits leaned on one another, coughing, their faces streaked in soot. Sandbags lay piled high like a wall built by desperation. The siren still wailed, softer now, its pitch a ghost of what it had been. But in the silence between the echoes, one truth remained. They were standing here because of her. Stood at the front of the line, shoulders squared, ash clinging to her lashes. She looked less like a trainee than a commander surveying a battlefield. The recruits who had mocked her hours ago now avoided her eyes, not from disdain, from reverence. Some clapped her shoulder as they passed, others said nothing at all. But the laughter, the cruel nickname, the mortar girl jeers had vanished into smoke. Watched from a few paces back, his boots planted in churned dirt. His jaw was iron. He had barked orders, he had called in reinforcements, but it hadn't been him they followed. It had been her. And worse, it had worked. He stepped forward, cutting through the murmurs. His voice came quiet but sharp as a blade. In my office now. Every recruit froze. Their eyes darted between the major and the woman they had just trusted with their lives. Gave one last order to the nearest soldier, check the wall, make sure no gaps remain. Then she followed him without hesitation. The door slammed shut behind them. Silence crashed heavier than smoke. Circled her slowly, arms crossed. His eyes raked every detail. Her uniform stained, her posture steady, her face calm, her hands raw from sandbags. You're going to explain, he said, his voice low, tight. She didn't blink. Explain what, sir? He leaned closer, his words a growl. Don't play dumb with me. You commanded like an officer out there. You moved like someone who's seen combat, and then there's this. His finger jabbed at her chest, the place where the metal had glinted in the sun. Her jaw flexed, she said nothing. I saw it, hissed. That insignia doesn't exist, not officially, not anymore. For the first time her eyes flickered, just a fraction, enough for him to know he was right. He pressed harder. That symbol belonged to a unit that was erased from records, Phantom Legion. The name dropped heavy between them, forbidden, cursed. Silence was confirmation. Slammed his palm on the desk, the crack echoing off the walls. Who are you? How the hell did you end up here, hiding in plain sight? She lifted her chin slowly. Her voice came steady, soft, but unbreakable. I didn't come here to lead. I came here to disappear, that's all. The words hit him like stone dropped in water, rippling through his mind. Disappear. Soldiers didn't vanish into anonymity. Not ones carrying medals stamped with ghosts. Not ones commanding fire lines like it was second nature. He stared at her, searching for cracks, finding only resolve, hardened, tired, but unyielding. This isn't over, he muttered at last, his voice sharp but shaken underneath. You may think you can bury whatever you are, but after today, everyone saw what you're capable of, and I'm not the only one who recognized it. Her eyes stayed forward, mask unbroken. But inside she felt it. The fire outside had been smothered, but another blaze had already been lit. Outside, recruits whispered her name. Inside, weighed her like a weapon he couldn't decide whether to sheath or wield. And in that silence, one truth pressed heavier than smoke. Camp Iron Veil would never look at her the same again. And the ghosts she had buried were clawing their way to the surface. The fire had been only the beginning. What spreads faster than fire? Not smoke, not flame. Whispers. The camp carried them like embers on the wind. No longer a name spoken with laughter. Now it was awe, suspicion, fear. Recruits lingered in small clusters, replaying the fire in hushed tones. She saved the camp. She stood when no one else did. And buried inside those murmurs, one word surfaced again and again. Legion. Inside's office, the air was heavier than the smoke outside. Stood at attention, soot still streaking her uniform. Paced, jaw clenched, hands restless. He had seen enough to know her story didn't belong in this camp, but he hadn't decided if she was a danger or the reason they had survived. The door burst open. Lieutenant stepped in without knocking. His face was pale, his eyes sharp. He froze when he saw her. Then the words tore out, "It's her." His glare cut at him, "That's enough." But's eyes never left, his hands trembled. "I saw it, that insignia, years ago in a briefing I was never meant to attend. Phantom Legion." The room seemed to shrink. The words hung like a curse. "They said every last one was wiped out," whispered, "and yet she's standing here." Didn't flinch. Her voice stayed calm, steady. "You should forget what you think you know." Laughed once, harsh, broken. "Forget? How do you forget seeing a ghost walk into your camp? You can't hide this. They'll want answers." Slammed his fist on the desk. "Get out." For a moment held his ground. His eyes burned with something between fear and reverence. Then his voice dropped, a whisper that still cut like steel. "The Legion isn't dead, not if she's here." And then he left, the door crashing behind him. The silence that followed was suffocating. His face carved into grim lines, remained rigid, mask unbroken. But inside she knew the truth. If recognized her, others would too. Her cover was fraying. Exhaled heavily. "This is spiraling. If runs his mouth, command will come down on us. And when they do, they won't just ask questions. They'll drag you back into whatever shadows you crawled out of." Her reply was quiet but sharp. "Then I'll do what I've always done, adapt, survive." Studied her, not weakness, not arrogance, just resolve, a soldier who had carried too much for too long. But outside the office, the storm was already building. By nightfall, the camp buzzed with rumors. Recruits stole glances at her, their voices too low to catch but heavy with meaning. Legion, ghost, leader. None of them called her Mortar Girl anymore. At dawn entered the barracks. His presence cut conversation short like a blade. "Outside," he ordered. followed him into the cold morning air. The sun bled pale light over smoking ruins. His voice was tight. Filed a report. Headquarters knows they're sending an envoy tomorrow. Her expression didn't change. Then let them. That's not an option, snapped. You don't understand. Phantom Legion isn't a name you toss around. It was erased for a reason. If they believe one of its ghosts is still breathing, they'll tear this place apart to prove it. She didn't answer. She only looked at the horizon, her jaw set. That evening, the officers gathered in the strategy tent. The fire's aftermath stilled the ground, but their arguments burned hotter. She took charge, one captain said. The recruits followed her, not us. That isn't normal. She carries something, pressed, his eyes flicking toward. I saw it. I know what I saw. Then why is she here disguised as a recruit? Another officer demanded. Either she's lying to all of us, or someone higher up planted her. The debate swelled, circling like vultures. Slammed his hand on the table. Enough, she saved your camp yesterday. Without her, you'd be digging graves. Whatever she was, she's here now. And until I get orders otherwise, she's under my command. Silence followed, uneasy, heavy. Doubt clung to every stare. Outside sat alone in the fading light, listening to the muffled voices bleed through canvas walls. Legion, metal, buried ghosts. She clenched her hands until her knuckles ached. No matter how hard she had tried to vanish, the past was clawing free. At dusk, a messenger arrived. Dust clung to his boots, his uniform stiff from the road. He carried a sealed envelope, the insignia of Central Command stamped in wax. Broke the seal in private. His eyes scanned the page, hardening with each line. When was summoned, night had already spread across the yard. Lanterns threw long shadows. Stood waiting, the letter folded tight in his fist. They know, he said, his voice flat. Headquarters receives report. They're sending Colonel Sloan tomorrow. You'll be brought before them for questioning. Didn't flinch, and if I refuse? Stare was cold. Then they'll come for you anyway, and they won't be gentle. Her gaze drifted upward, toward the first stars blinking faint through smoke-stained air. For years she had survived by silence, by blending into ranks where no one cared enough to ask questions. Now silence was no shield. The camp outside still whispered her name, soft but insistent. The word Legion threaded itself through the air like fire through dry grass. His voice cut through the dark. You need to decide. Tomorrow, when they arrive, you can go in shackles, or you can face them standing tall. Either way, this secret isn't staying buried. Ash stirred in the breeze, spiraling upward like sparks. Jaw tightened. The fire of yesterday had died. But another blaze was already moving toward Camp Iron Vale. And she knew, this time, there would be no sandbags to hold it back. What happens when the ghosts you tried to bury are dragged into daylight? What do you do when silence no longer hides you, because the world has already decided what you are? Morning came heavy at Camp Iron Vale. The sky veiled in haze, pale sunlight smothered by smoke still clinging from the fire. Soldiers stood in ranks than usual, boots aligned, eyes restless. Conversations hushed mid-sentence as their gazes turned toward the road cutting through the hills. Word had spread, no rumor anymore. A convoy was coming, an envoy from command. Stepped out from the barracks. Her uniform was pressed clean, but faint smudges lingered at the cuffs, ghosts of ash that even soap couldn't erase. Every step she took drew silence. Recruits parted for her instinctively, not jeering this time, not dismissing, waiting. Stood by the flagpole, his stance rigid, shadows deep under his eyes. He hadn't slept. Could see it in the way his jaw clenched, the way his hands locked behind his back. They'll try to break you down fast, he muttered low so only she could hear. Authority, intimidation. They'll strip you word by word until nothing's left. Whatever you say decides not just your fate but this camp. She looked at him, calm, steady. And what if silence is the only thing that keeps me alive? Before he could answer, the sound rose. engines growling across the ridges, dust clouds twisting into the air. The convoy appeared, dark vehicles rolling in perfect formation, steel glinting, authority made flesh. The camp shrank around the sound. The lead car door opened with mechanical precision. Out stepped Colonel Sloan. His reputation had arrived before him, a man who pulled secrets out of stone. His uniform gleamed immaculate, insignia sharp enough to cut. He scanned the camp once, then his eyes locked on her. "Bring her forward." 2 soldiers moved, but blocked them with a raised arm. "She walks on her own." Sloane's gaze flicked to him, then back too. A faint smile ghosted across his lips. "Very well, let's hear from the woman who saved your camp." Her boots struck the parade ground louder than they should have. Each step echoed like an amplifier. She stopped before him, her face unreadable. Sloane studied her as though she were a classified file he'd been chasing for years. "You wear the face of a recruit," he said evenly. "But reports tell me you commanded men like someone who's seen fire before. And then there's the matter of an emblem." His eyes narrowed. "Lift your jacket." The ground held its breath. Hesitated, just long enough for silence to deepen. Then she unfastened the top button, pulling the fabric aside. The metal caught the light. A flash of forbidden steel. Gasps rippled through the gathered soldiers. Sloane's expression hardened. Phantom Legion, a name that lives only in classified files, even there redacted to nothing. That program was dismantled. No survivors. He stepped closer, his voice cutting softer, sharper. "And yet here you are." Her heartbeat pressed steady against her ribs, but her voice was calm. "I didn't come here to be found. I came to vanish into the ranks, to serve quietly, nothing more." "Impossible," Sloane replied. "Men don't follow ghosts unless the ghost still breathes power. Yesterday they followed you." Whispers stirred through the ranks. Recruits shifted, eyes flicking between Sloane and her. Stood silent, jaw tight, fists clenched at his sides. Then from the crowd, a voice broke. "She saved us." It was the boy she had pulled to his feet during the fire. His voice cracked, but his words carried. "If she hadn't taken charge, half of us would burned. You weren't here. We were." Silence collapsed into murmurs, spreading like sparks. Recruits nodding, whispers swelling into something louder, more dangerous. Sloane turned, eyes sweeping the line. He saw it, the loyalty etched raw on their faces, not discipline, conviction. Turned slightly, her gaze brushing across them. Young, soot-streaked, still trembling, but their eyes lit with belief. Something shifted heavy inside her chest. She could no longer pretend to be invisible. Sloane's voice cut cold again. "So that's it, they already believe. Whether you like it or not, the Legion lives through you." Stepped forward sharp. "Enough. If command wants answers, you'll take them from me, not from someone who earned this camp's respect by saving lives." But Sloane only smiled faintly. "Respect is fickle, fear is permanent, and fear will decide how this ends." He gestured to his escort. "Tonight she comes with us. If she resists, the entire camp suffers." Recruits stiffened. Outrage flickered in their eyes but lifted a hand, just enough to still them before they erupted. Her voice rang clear, carrying across the yard. "If going with you keeps them safe, I'll go." The words landed like stone, heavy, unshakable. His head snapped toward her, disbelief flashing, but she held his gaze calm. Sloane nodded once, wise. He turned to his escort. "Prepare transport." The convoy engines growled to life again, like beasts waking at dusk. And as the sun bled into shadows, Camp Iron Veil braced itself. Because this wasn't an arrest. It was an abduction dressed in ceremony. And everyone knew it. What does a camp sound like when it knows a soldier is being taken? Not disciplined silence, not restless chatter. Something colder. The quiet of betrayal. Night draped itself heavy across Camp Iron Vale. Lanterns burned dim. Shadows stretched long across the yard, broken only by the steady glow of convoy headlights. Engines thrummed low, patient, like predators waiting for a signal. The soldiers of the camp stood apart, scattered in the dark. Not dismissed, not at ease, just unwilling to move. Their eyes traced the barracks, the vehicles, the figure who would be forced between them. Sat on the edge of her bunk. Her hands rested in her lap, palms open, steady. Her jacket lay folded beside her. The metal was hidden again, but it didn't matter. Everyone had seen it. Everyone knew. Her breath rose slow, calm, but inside her chest a storm pressed harder. Disappearing had always been her survival. Blending, fatting, but now faces haunted her. Recruits who had carried sandbags beside her, who had followed her voice through smoke. They didn't see a ghost, they saw a leader. And that terrified her more than Sloane's convoy outside. The door opened. Stepped in, shadows cutting across his face. He shut it quietly, as though the night itself was listening. "They're ready for you," he said. Nodded once, "I know." He didn't move closer. His fists remained tight at his sides. His voice, though low, carried heat barely contained. "This isn't right. You're not under arrest, you're being erased. You think going with them protects the recruits, but it doesn't. Sloane isn't bringing you to a courtroom, he's burying you." Her eyes lifted to his, calm, resigned. "If I fight, they'll burn this camp to ash, proving a point. I won't be the spark for that." His jaw locked. He wanted to shout, to break something, to drag her into hiding, but the fury caught in his throat, because deep down he knew she was right. He exhaled hard, like forcing air out of a wound. "Then at least let me walk you out." Minutes later, the barracks door opened again. Stepped into the night at her side. The convoy lights flared brighter, bathing the yard in harsh white. Sloane stood waiting, his silhouette sharp against the glow. His soldiers lined up neat, rifles slung but ready. "On time," Sloane said evenly. "Efficient. I expected nothing less from a ghost of the Legion." Didn't answer. Her boots struck the dirt steady as she walked. Each step carried weight. But behind her something stirred. The recruits. First one, then another, then half a dozen, stepping out of shadows, forming loose lines. Their faces young, but their eyes hardened. They weren't armed. They weren't ordered, but they stood. Sloane's gaze flicked across them, unimpressed. Children playing soldier, move aside. The boy she had saved during the fire spoke up, his voice breaking but clear. "If she goes, we go too." A ripple ran through the group. Nods, murmurs of agreement, boots shuffling into firmer stances. Felt his chest tighten. He hadn't told them to do this, but they had learned something he hadn't been able to teach, loyalty not born of command but of choice. Sloane's smile was thin, cruel, touching but irrelevant. Loyalty doesn't shield against orders. Raised her hand slightly, her voice calm but strong. "Stand down, all of you, this isn't your fight." But they didn't move. Not an inch. The tension hung thick, a live wire strung between headlights and shadows. One wrong twitch and it would snap. Sloane gestured to his soldiers, "Escort her now." Two men stepped forward. His body shifted, instinct screaming to intervene. His hand hovered near his sidearm. He felt the weight of a dozen recruits behind him, waiting, watching. But moved first. She stepped forward, her posture steady, unbroken. "I'll go," she said, voice carrying across the yard. "No need for shackles, no need for force." The soldiers hesitated, uncertain. Sloane's hand flicked, permission given. Climbed into the convoy's lead vehicle. The door slammed shut behind her, steel echoing like a final verdict. Outside, engines roared louder, vibrating through the ground. Sloane turned one last time to the camp. His eyes met, cold, satisfied. "Discipline your men, Major, or I will." He climbed into his car. The convoy rolled forward, dust curling behind wheels, lights cutting the night open. The camp watched in silence. Faces pale, jaws clenched, eyes burning with something between grief and fury. Stood rooted, every muscle tight, watching the red tail lights fade into the distance. The camp had lost a soldier tonight. But worse, it had lost the illusion of safety. And deep inside's chest, a decision hardened. This wasn't the end of. It was the beginning of a fight none of them were ready for, yet all of them were bound to join. What breaks first in the dark, steel or silence? The convoy cut through the night like a blade, headlights carving white paths over desolate hills. Engines hummed steady, tires grinding gravel. Inside, the lead vehicle sat straight-backed, wrists resting calm on her knees. Two escorts flanked her, rifles across their laps. Across from her, Colonel Sloan leaned back, studying her with the patience of a man who had broken many before. His eyes glimmered in the dim light. "You could save yourself a great deal of pain," he began. His tone wasn't harsh, not yet. Smooth, calculated. "Just tell me why you were at Iron Vale. A Legion insignia doesn't simply fall into the lap of a recruit." Her eyes didn't move from the dark window. Outside, the landscape blurred, a smear of stone brush shadow. Sloane's smile tightened. The Legion was erased, officially, but whispers linger, ghost stories, men who never existed. If you survived, if you walked out of that fire while the rest didn't, then you're more valuable than you admit. Still nothing. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a near whisper. "I can protect you. You think the recruits you saved matter. They'll be rotated out, forgotten. But your secrets could shift entire wars or bury them." Her reflection in the glass stared back at her. Calm, controlled. Only her hands betrayed her, fingers pressed harder into her knees. Sloane's smile faded. "Or perhaps you prefer silence, that can be arranged, but silence has a cost." The convoy jolted over a rut. Dust plumed in the beams of light. Finally turned her head. Her voice was low, even. "I've paid it already." The words hit like a shot, short, cold, final. For the first time, Sloane's composure cracked, just a flicker. He leaned back again, his smirk forced. "We'll see how long that lasts." The engines droned on. The road stretched endless, and sat, still as stone, unbroken. Back at Camp Iron Vale, the knight didn't rest. Sat at his desk, the convoy's dust still burning in his mind. Orders weighed heavy in the folder before him. Command's insignia stamped bold across the page, as if to remind him of the chain wrapped around his throat. He should be relieved, the problem removed, the secret contained. But relief never came. Instead, anger burned slow in his gut. Anger at Sloane's smugness, at the recruits' wide eyes, at the way he had walked into that convoy with no chains, and yet every step had felt like a prison door slamming shut. A knock rattled his door. Before he could answer, it opened. The boy from the fire entered. His voice shook, but his eyes were firm. "Sir, we can't just let them take her." His head snapped up. "Watch yourself, soldier." But the boy didn't flinch. "She saved us. She taught us more in one day than I've learned in months, and she went with them to protect us. We can't just pretend it didn't happen." Behind him, more recruits filled the doorway. Faces grim, eyes burning. No one spoke, but the message was clear. Rose slowly, fists planted on his desk. His voice came low, heavy. "Do you understand what you're saying? Defying command isn't disobedience, it's treason." The boy swallowed but didn't look away. Then maybe treason's what's left when loyalty been betrayed. The words landed like a stone dropped in still water, rippling through the room. Looked at them, raw, young, untested, and felt the weight of a truth he'd been fighting since the siren first sounded. Hadn't stolen their loyalty. She had earned it, and nothing in command's orders could erase that. But he also knew what Sloane would do if he sensed unrest. A crackdown, a purge. The recruits wouldn't survive it. He exhaled, slow, steady. "Get back to your bunks, that's an order." They hesitated, murmurs rippled, but eventually one by one they turned. The boy laughed, his eyes still locked on, then the door closed. Sank into his chair. His hands rubbed his face. He knew sleep wouldn't come, not tonight, not ever again. The convoy pressed deeper into the night. Inside, silence had hardened into something sharp. Sloane no longer spoke. His eyes studied her like a puzzle he hated not solving. Let the hum of the engine drown the weight pressing on her chest. She thought of the recruits, their young faces blackened by smoke, their hands raw from sandbags, their eyes when they looked at her not with mockery but belief. She hadn't asked for that. She hadn't wanted it. But it had followed her anyway. And now, with every mile the convoy devoured, she felt it pulling taut behind her, a tether that refused to snap. At Camp Iron Vale, the recruits lay restless in their bunks. Sleep eluded them. The boy whispered into the dark, words slipping across the rows. She wouldn't leave us, not really, so why should we leave her? Others shifted, mutters followed, agreement, fear, resolve. A spark moved through the barracks unseen by officers, carried on whispers alone. Not training, not orders, something older. Loyalty. And in the command tent stared at a map of the valley, his eyes locked on the twisting roads cutting toward headquarters. His fists clenched, his mind warred. Every rule screamed to let her go. Every instinct screamed louder. The camp was no longer his. Not really. It was hers. And if he didn't act, Sloane would break her, and everything she represented. His eyes closed for one long breath. When they opened again, they were steady. The choice had already been made. On the road, the convoy slowed as the terrain narrowed into a canyon pass. The air grew colder. The moon cut silver over jagged cliffs. Sloane glanced out the window, then back at. His smile returned, thin, cutting. Enjoy the view. It may be the last freedom you taste. Her eyes flicked once toward him, and though her voice was quiet, it carried the weight of stone. Freedom isn't yours to give or take. The words lingered in the hum of the engine, stronger than they should have been. And far behind them, in the restless dark of Camp Iron Vale, a storm was already gathering. How far will men go for someone they believe in? How far will one woman let them go, before she admits she believes in them too? The canyon loomed ahead. Walls of jagged rock pressed close, shadows swallowing the convoy's glow. Engines strained against the climb, tires crunching stone. The air thinned, colder, sharper. Colonel Sloane leaned back in his seat, smugness settling like armor. Beside him sat silent, her posture unbroken. Every bump of the road rattled through her bones, but she gave nothing away. In the distance, faint glimmers pricked against the dark. Lights, unnatural, waiting. Sloane's eyes narrowed. What is this? The convoy rounded a bend, then braked hard. Across the narrow pass, a barricade blocked the road. Not steel, not command vehicles, sandbags, crates. A makeshift wall, rough but solid, and behind it shadows in formation. Soldiers. Not Sloane's. Recruits. Camp Iron Vale. At their front stood, rifles slung, eyes lit with fire that had nothing to do with orders. The canyon fell into silence. Engines idled low, dust hung suspended, every heart beat against stone. Sloane's jaw tightened. What game is this, Major? His voice carried across the night, steady as steel. No game, you're not taking her. Murmurs rippled through Sloane's escort. Rifles shifted. Fingers hovered near triggers. His chest tightened. She pushed against the door, the weight of inevitability crushing down. She hadn't wanted this. She had warned them. But there they stood, every one of them, because of her. Sloane's smirk returned, cold, cruel. You're a fool. Do you think these children can stand against command? That a handful of recruits can resist the weight of the empire? His reply cut like stone. They already did, when fire threatened the camp, when your convoy rolled in. And now, when you try to erase the only soldier who's shown them what loyalty means. Pulse hammered. She shoved the door open, boots striking dirt. Soldiers jerked, rifles twitching, but she raised her hands high, her voice cutting sharp. Enough. The canyon echoed. Every rifle froze, every breath caught. She stepped between them, between Sloane's convoy and wall. Her figure lit in twin beams of headlights, shadows stretching long across rock. Her voice broke raw, not loud but powerful. This isn't your fight, any of you. Her gaze swept the recruits, faces pale in the dark but eyes burning. You don't know what you're standing against. Sloane is right. He carries power, authority. If you stay here, you'll be crushed beneath it. The boy who had spoken before called out again. Then we'll be crushed together. Better that than watching you be taken alone. The words stabbed through her. Her breath hitched, the mask of silence cracking at last. She turned too. Why risk everything? You owe me nothing. His jaw clenched, his eyes never left hers. Because the moment you stepped into that fire, you stopped being a ghost. You became what they needed, and I'll be damned if I let command kill that light. Silence pressed heavy. The canyon walls themselves seemed to lean closer. Sloane's patience snapped. Enough of this theater, arrest them all. His soldiers hesitated, just a breath, just a glance toward the recruits standing unarmed but unyielding. Stepped forward, her voice cutting like thunder. No. She ripped the metal from beneath her jacket, holding it high. The light caught on its etched surface, the forbidden insignia gleaming undeniable. You want a ghost, she shouted. Here I am, Phantom Legion, not erased, not forgotten, alive. And if you want me, you take me alone, leave them out of it. The canyon held its breath. Sloane's soldiers shifted, unease spreading like cracks in stone. They had all heard the whispers. Now they saw the truth burning in her eyes. Raised his rifle, not at Sloane, not at the recruits, but into the air. The shot cracked like lightning, echoing off stone. Recruits followed, rifles snapping up, a line of defiance drawn across the canyon. Sloane's soldiers wavered, outnumbered, no, outmatched. Not exactly, but loyalty wasn't on their side, and loyalty has its own weight. Sloane's face twisted, rage, frustration, the loss of control. You'll regret this, he spat. All of you, you think this ends here. The Empire doesn't forget. Lowered the metal slowly, her voice soft but steady. Neither do I. The standoff stretched. Then like a storm breaking, Sloane's hand flicked. His soldiers lowered their rifles, reluctant, unwilling, but they obeyed. Engines growled again. The convoy reversed, wheels grinding against stone, backing away into the night. And just like that, the canyon was theirs. When the last taillight vanished, silence lingered. Only the wind moved, whispering low between the cliffs. Stood still, metal clenched in her fist. Around her, recruits shifted, relief mixing with disbelief. Stepped closer, his voice low, private. You could let him take you. Why didn't you? Her breath shuddered out. Because of them, they didn't let me. Her eyes swept the recruits, faces young, tired, but lit with something unshakable. Not fear, not doubt, belief. And for the first time in years, something unfamiliar stirred in her chest. Hope. His hand rested on her shoulder, firm. Whatever the Legion was, whatever command tried to erase, you're more than that now. You're theirs. She looked once more at the metal in her hand. Then she closed her fist around it, hard enough for the edges to bite. No longer a ghost. Not yet free. But alive. Back at Camp Iron Vale, dawn bled across the horizon. Recruits moved with quiet purpose, shoulders, eyes sharper. Whispers of Legion no longer carried fear. They carried pride. Stood at the edge of the field, watching the sun climb higher. Stepped beside her, silence stretching between them. Finally she spoke. They think I'm more than I am. His reply was steady. No, they see what you've always been. You just stopped hiding long enough for them to notice. The wind stirred, carrying smoke's last ghost from the ruins of the fire. The camp stirred awake, alive again, not because of command but because of choice. His voice dropped, almost a whisper. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And in that silence, the truth stood taller than any medal, any command, any empire. Not a ghost. Not erased. Human. Alive.